Happy Monday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door. Good to have you with us. Fun show coming up. It's John Stinchcomb later on. Really interesting research going to be a part of today's program. Now, most of it is very much over my head, and I'm sure I might not even describe all of it completely accurately, but we're going to have a good time trying to figure out what the numbers say about what Georgia may do this upcoming season. Also, there is a very weird scenario involving a basketball coach in the SEC that I think may have gotten himself in some trouble with his football coach. I'll explain that coming up. Generally speaking, it's going to be a really fun day. A lot to get into. Georgia just never stops being interesting around here, and so we'll touch on all of that today, including how the quarterback competition may go a long way towards determining just how successful the Dogs can be this upcoming season. I'll explain why off the top. As DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So when Jamie Newman made his transfer arrival at UGA, there was this immediate collection of hype around him, which is really for Georgia football. I mean, let's be honest. That is just sort of par for the course. And a lot of times we're kind of the engineer of the hype train around here. I sort of realize all of that. The Newman thing was pretty aggressive, though, because there was one website that had him at near the top for Heisman favorites. I think since then, another website's even made his Heisman odds even lower. In other words, this is the quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia still, after National Signing Day, number one class for 2020, would look to be a major championship contender. Why would the quarterback not be a Heisman contender? Some people are going to say. It's really been kind of amazing, kind of all the hype that exists around Jamie Newman for the upcoming season. And we've said before around here that ultimately, our projection for Newman is somewhere in between the sort of lofty thing of, this is one of the best returning quarterbacks in all of college football, and the sort of dismissive tone of non-Georgia fans who would say, Wake Forest quarterback, what's a guy like that going to do in the SEC? We think the truth for Newman has kind of always been somewhere in the middle. We've made our case on that before. It is interesting to point out, though, that when Kirby Smart back last Wednesday was talking about Newman, he used a word that I think was intentional, and it's something we've kind of debated around here and kicked around. My feeling on this may be a little bit different than Smart's is, but Smart used a word, I believe, that was intentionally added into a sentence to kind of try to sort of turn down the juice a little bit on the Jamie Newman Hype Express. I've played this for you before, but I want to play it for you again as a way of setting up what I want to say kind of off the top of the program here. This is Smart on Newman from Wednesday. Take a listen.
Well, we had researched the entire year with the thought that Jake would have the opportunity to come out early. So we had a pool of 30 to 40 guys that we thought would be potential, whether they were transfers, whether they were grad transfers, whatever it may be. We knew we could possibly be in the quarterback market, and that included high school kids. And certainly excited about Carson and what he can do for our team. He came in and got to practice with us for the bowl game for a couple practices as well. But once Jamie went into the portal and we knew he was going to be a graduate transfer, we started communication immediately. And it was a process of finding out if what he wanted aligned with what we wanted, and also waiting to see what Jake was going to do. So I know Jamie has been very mature about the process. He is, these grad transfers, number one, the fact that graduated college and graduated from Wake Forest, these kids understand what they want, and they're very driven in what they want. They're not really into the whole recruiting process. So he handled it that way, and he's very, very professional about it, and we're looking forward to putting him to work and letting him go out and compete this spring.
So you hear they're looking forward to seeing him go out and compete this spring. In other words, just because he was a starter at Wake Forest and just because he's gotten some love from some of the analytics websites and some of the, sort of deep dive college football websites, he's coming into our program to compete. In that competition, now Smart doesn't say this, but we can certainly presume from that competition is going to include Stetson Bennett, who was here and on this team last year, Dwan Mathis, who we certainly hope is returning back to a full health, and as Kirby Smart also mentioned, the other name that will be in that competition will be Carson Beck, who is on campus, arrived as an early enrollee, and one of those guys that you have certainly read a lot about on the pages of DawgNation.com for what he did as a high school player in the state of Florida, what he has the potential to bring to UGA, and the fact that he is in that kind of enviable position. Not every incoming freshman quarterback can be able to say this, of being on campus right now. You would certainly presume from that, well, that's going to put him more in a position to really compete this spring and give Jamie Newman a run for his money. And obviously, the hope of UGA fans is that the best man will emerge from all of that. As far as what it's like to be on campus right now and getting used to all of this and setting yourself up for the competition that's going to take place really in just a few weeks. We're not that far away from the start of spring practice, which is certainly a really good news. UGA the other day released a kind of an interesting video where DJ Shockley, the former Georgia quarterback, interviewed all the early enrollees who are on campus right now. One of those guys was Beck, and according to Beck's own words here, thinking about him as a part of this competition, getting acclimated to college life, it sounds like that transition's been, at least in his own words, fairly easy thus far. Here's Carson Beck.
I mean, it's definitely been everything I expected personally. The transition has been pretty easy, getting through workouts, kind of figuring all that out, figuring out the campus. But it's definitely been easier with all of us kind of coming in together early. It'd definitely be a lot different, I feel like, personally, if I just came in early all by myself. But we've kind of helped each other out and helped find our way around and kind of get used to the whole process of this.
So Carson Beck says, I'm on campus, I'm getting used to the process, I'm getting comfortable at UGA, and if he took his thoughts a step further in what he says there, I'm guessing he'd say, and I'm ready to compete and maybe earn this starting quarterback job as a true freshman, the same way that Jake Fromm became that guy for Georgia in 2017. Carson Beck would say, I'm ready to sort of do my own version of that here in 2020. But on this show, I've kind of made the case that I think that this year's quarterback situation for Georgia is a little bit different than maybe it's been in the past, and that I would actually treat Jamie Newman as a little bit more of an entrenched starter for Georgia, even though he's done his previous work at Wake Forest. And the idea that Smart kind of always wants that intense competition at the quarterback position, I think this year is a little bit different there in that regard. And I want to try to give you some numbers that I think kind of back this up, why I think Georgia fans should view Newman as the guy and at least hope that he truly does emerge that way, what it seems on paper that he might. Now, listen, I've told y'all before, I'm not great at math. There's a chance I'm not going to explain all of this 100% right, but I do think this is interesting. I'll put a link to this. You can kind of read this for yourself. It's one of the interesting moments in that kind of off-season calendar. There's a lot of kind of like tent poles, quarter poles we have to kind of get around to get to the upcoming season. One of those very early in the process, there's a sort of a math guy, Bill Conley. He works for ESPN now, and he puts out what he calls his returning production for the upcoming season. This is not returning starters because, as Conley explains, starters alone can be a little bit of a misnomer, a little bit of a misleading number in terms of who brings what back to the upcoming season. He looks at percentages of, like, say, passes broken up or tackles for loss on defense, percentage of rushing yards, receiving yards, passing yards. And he says, though, those returning percentages of productivity is really a better estimate for the upcoming season than the actual number of returning starters. Now, here's where things kind of get a little bit mathy and kind of may cause your eyes to gloss over for a moment, but nonetheless, I think it's pretty interesting. So for his formula, in terms of who brings what back, percentages of production for the previous season, he weights quarterback at 32%, basically saying that having your passing yards from a previous year returning is worth 32% of your overall formula for the upcoming year. And in the same ESPN.com story, he kind of goes on to explain, I won't give you all the numbers and all the details on this, but he basically lays it out in pretty stark terms that if you're not bringing back a lot of production from the year before, you can expect your offense to be worse in this upcoming season. If you're not bringing back your rushing yards, if you're not bringing back your receiving yards, and Conley's formula receiving yards is way, way more important than the average person would think it would. And by the way, last year, maybe Georgia on the field was a perfect example of all of that. Obviously, Georgia didn't bring back a lot of productivity at the receiving position, and we know how much the offense struggled for Georgia in 2019. Well, Conley weighs the return of passing yards, experience at the quarterback position, just as much as he weighs the experience there at the wide receiver position, or those guys who are catching passes for you. And even though Newman got his experience playing for a place like Wake Forest, he still has some experience, which makes him a little bit different than Carson Beck or Jamie or Stetson Bennett or any of the quarterbacks that you might consider competing for this job here right now. Newman has some of that experience. So the overall point in reading all of this is, for Georgia, who needs to take a step forward offensively, it would certainly seem that there's only one real surefire way to feel comfortable about doing that. It's to have some experience at the quarterback position. And yes, it'll be a competition. Smart used that word when he spoke on Wednesday. And it could very well be that some of the guys competing with Newman may themselves go on to be really good quarterbacks. There's a lot to like about Dwan Mathis. And there's a lot to like about Stetson Bennett. There's a lot to like about Carson Beck, who we just kind of heard from there a moment ago. But in terms of feeling good about what Georgia's going to be able to do on a field this year, I think this is an example where experience matters. Even if I don't quite understand all the math that Bill Connelly uses, I'm at least smart enough to assume that he's telling the truth and assume that his numbers at ESPN.com say what he says they do, which is that the easiest thing to bet on, the easiest thing to predict is experience showing up in a big way for the upcoming season. Georgia's got that in Jamie Newman, and that's one of the reasons why his presence as a graduate transfer, I think, is going to be so valuable for the team this season. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. It is great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. Video, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to be able to have you as part of our program here today. We'll get our buddy John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a minute. I also want to remind you, as I said before, brought to you by our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Energy-efficient windows and doors. This is the kind of thing that your house really needs. It could save you money on your heating bill, your energy bill. It keeps what's supposed to be inside from creeping to the outside. It keeps from what's outside from coming inside. That's one of those things those energy-efficient windows and doors can do for you. Of course, Pella, a national company with a branch locally owned right here in Georgia. That means you get that family-owned service. That means you get the power, the resources that come from a nationally known company. It's really the best of both worlds. How about this offer right now? You can currently get 50% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 48 months. That offer is valid through March 12th. So a couple ways to get in touch. Online, PellaBranch.com. That's PellaBranch.com. Or you can give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom at 404-445-2979. The number once again, 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. As I said before, we'll talk to John Stinchcomb here in just a moment. And one of the things I'm going to talk to John about is the challenge of potentially trying to play a position like offensive tackle, a spot that John knows a lot about as a true freshman in the SEC. This comes up because of something that Kirby Smart spoke about on Wednesday. He was asked about in the aftermath of National Signing Day, and by the way, I'll mention this as we go around the doghouse here on our program today. This kind of came up because one of the big recruiting wins for Georgia was to secure a guy like Broderick Jones, keep him from taking that final official visit to Auburn, get him to sign there on that Wednesday. Kirby was asked, hey, having Jones in the mix here, how important is that for you, knowing that Isaiah Wilson is gone? Andrew Thomas is gone. You could also add, I guess, Cade Mays into that too, a guy that could have played some offensive tackle for Georgia this season. He's gone now as well. How important is having a guy like Broderick Jones? And Smart kind of pivoted to some guys not who were about to arrive on campus, but some guys who've been here for a moment. This was an interesting statement from Smart on the current state of his competition at offensive tackle. Here's Kirby.
Well, it was a lot more important a year ago to sign Xavier Truss. It was a lot more important a year ago to sign Warren Mcclendon, because when you have Andrew Thomas and Isaiah Wilson, you understand there's an opportunity for these guys to leave. I'm not a big believer that the next guy's just going to walk in and play for Andrew Thomas and Isaiah. You have to plan things a year out. So really we're looking at this saying, okay, these guys are going to have to be ready to play possibly next year, but really the next year. But we're a year away from what could look like the O-line, because we have some potential guys who come out. So what are you doing to develop the ones you're signing now is more my concern. You know, it'd be foolish for me to sit here and think that two of these tackles we just signed are going to walk in here and play. You guys will print that, but I'm also a realist that that's probably not going to happen. Based on the history of the SEC, you do the study, how many freshman offensive tackles have played. That's tough to find. You know what I mean? It's hard to do. Now, if they're the athletic and they're the best guys, or we have injuries, those guys will provide us great depth. And I certainly think a lot of these guys we just signed are talented enough to come in and help us. But they're not mid-year guys, and they'll have to come in and compete for it.
So Kirby says to do the study on that, and our buddy Connor Riley at DawgNation.com indeed did that. You can read that this morning at DawgNation.com. Also, I'll make sure I put a link to this when we post the show later on today at DawgNation.com. Here's what Connor found. I'm going to read you a couple sentences from his piece at DawgNation.com this morning. By the way, Connor will be with us tomorrow. We'll talk to him some about this. He says, in the past 5 seasons, Andrew Thomas, that was Georgia's starter at left tackle this past year, and obviously at right tackle as a freshman in 2017, was one of just 5 players in all of college football who were ranked among the top 60 prospects, that's 60 prospects in the 24/7 Sports Composite ranking, to start every game when healthy at either tackle position as a freshman. Connor says that in the SEC, only Thomas, Jonah Williams from Alabama, Wanya Morris from Tennessee have been able to do such a thing. The other 2 were Mitch Hyatt from Clemson, you'll remember him from North Gwinnett High School, and Penei Sewell of Oregon. He says Sewell, though, missed 6 games with an injury. Morris missed 1. He says, by comparison, 19 of the 48 offensive linemen who fit in that data range redshirted in their first year on campus. Now, I would say that about 10% of the guys who kind of fit that category excelling at the college level, to me, seems like a pretty reasonable distribution of results for something like that. And a guy like Andrew Thomas being at the far end of that obviously is really good news for UGA fans. The other thing that I kind of notice about this is it seems like there are 2 reasons where sometimes a freshman elite recruit might get pushed into a starting role as a tackle in the SEC or at the very high level of college football. And one of these is a really good thing. One of these maybe not quite so much of a good thing. It's either because the player in question is truly an elite talent, even in a category above the already rarefied categories already in, or in other cases, maybe the program was just so desperate for help they had to turn to that freshman. I mean, Jonah Williams starting in Alabama may be an example of a player just being really, really, really good. Wanya Morris getting thrown into the battle for Tennessee, that may have been more an example of a program like Tennessee who had not been recruiting elite linemen prior to that, just really, really needing someone who could come into play, especially given the fact that Trey Smith, their other elite offensive line, was dealing with a little bit of a health issue. So it seems like there are 2 wildly different reasons why sometimes these freshmen get called into duty. Maybe for Georgia back in 2017, Andrew Thomas was kind of an example of that. Of Georgia had 1 tackle they felt really good about, but on the other spot, maybe you just really, really needed someone to step up. So that's why Smart's words from a moment ago, I think, should be comforting for UGA fans, that Smart feeling good enough about Xavier Truss to mention him by name, feeling good enough about Warren Mcclendon to mention him by name, that maybe Georgia might not quite find itself in that desperate category this season of having to have a freshman compete. It could be that a guy like Broderick Jones or maybe even Tate Ratledge is just so good you can't keep him off the field. But it sounds like Smart's got some confidence in some of the guys that he does have, which I think is a really good piece of news. Before I get John Stinchcomb, let me give you a really fun thing here from our friends with the Atlanta Braves. Of course, pitchers and catchers are about to report. That means the Braves want to do something to kind of celebrate that. Of course, it's a brand new state-of-the-art spring training home this year, Northport, Florida, and in honor of the fact that they're going to be getting going here pretty soon, the Braves are going to do a 3-day flash sale starting Wednesday at 10 a.m., and it's going to end midnight Friday. So you've got to act now to take advantage of this. All seats in the ballpark are going to be 30% off for April-May games. What an amazing deal that's going to be. This includes opening day there as well, so a great chance to step in, take advantage of some great savings, but you got to go really, really fast to do that, starting Wednesday at 10 through midnight on Friday. By the way, the schedule is stacked this year as well. You got the Dodgers coming in, Mike Trout and the Angels making a rare appearance at Truist Park, also the Cubs, the Red Sox, and a chance to see some really, really great baseball here at the newly named Truist Park there in Atlanta. So spring training showing up. Braves baseball about to return to Truist Park. Let's get ready to celebrate. Go to braves.com/tickets. That's braves.com/tickets. And you can take advantage of a great, great offer starting Wednesday and then concluding on Friday. Atlanta Braves baseball for the A. All right, it is good to have you with us today. It's DawgNation Daily presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. More fun from Kirby Smart later on. For now, though, let's get ready to talk to John Stinchcomb.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So, John, I just gave some pretty interesting data from our buddy Connor Riley a moment ago, and I want to make sure we talk about that. The challenge of playing the offensive line position, the tackle position in particular, as a freshman in a league as intense as the SEC is. But before that, let me just do my due diligence and say hello to you. Hope you stayed warm over the weekend and didn't get completely snowed out where you were. All right, sounds like we maybe have a little bit of an issue with John there. We'll see if we can get him squared away and get ready to go. Always good to have John. You hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. So it's good to have you on the program. I hope you had a nice weekend. One of the things that we were talking about before you joined us is the rarity of succeeding at a position like offensive tackle as a freshman. We've seen Andrew Thomas do that at Georgia. There are other examples around college football where that has happened. But as Connor Riley wrote this morning at DawgNation.com, it's not the most common occurrence. The stats saying it's overwhelmingly more likely that someone, won't be able to do something like that. You know the tackle position really well. How tough is that for a guy fresh out of high school? And what in particular, I guess, other than the elite player that's lining up across from you, what in particular makes that so challenging?
Oh, it's a huge challenge. I think it only very few players can do it well. Sometimes situations demand it just because you don't have the talent in-house that you probably should have cultivated over the last 3 years when you lose a player. And Georgia is losing two really high-quality tackles. Now, the good situation is that you've been able to recruit for the past few years. You've been able to get these guys that fans were excited about a couple of Februaries and Decembers ago when, we just finished signing day this year, and you get fired up for folks, and it's always, what have you done for me lately? And it's the latest and greatest recruit that folks get, really excited about. And that's a good thing. I get it. But I think what Coach Smart is saying is, tackle's one of those positions where if you're relying on a guy to walk in the door straight out of high school and anchor one of those positions, as a program, that's not a good philosophy. The challenges are, one, it's such a mental demand increase from high school to college. One, the play calls, the defensive schemes that you see. I often talk about with the college guys getting ready for the draft that I get to train. In high school, you're able to see the defensive player in front of you and maybe the tackle next to him, and you might see a linebacker that's kind of blurry, but at least in your zone. That's what you have vision on. And you get to college and you see the entire defensive front and the box. You know where the linebackers are at, you know where the D-line's at, and you might pick up on a safety that's coming down maybe as you become more of a veteran. And then in the pros, you're expected to know pretty much where the secondary players are, and you've got a full picture. So just your vision and ability to take in information has got to increase as you go up in the ranks. Same thing for these high school kids coming out and preparing for college football, and not just college football, but the best conference in all of amateur sports in the SEC. So that demand is pretty high. I think what's probably more realistic is maybe a timeshare opportunity for some of these incoming freshmen, in that, it is a prime opportunity. Very rarely do you have both tackles leave, whether they're seniors that graduate out or, in the case of both Andrew and Isaiah, opt to leave early and go for the draft. So there is opportunity there, and I think what's probably more likely is if they're ready, maybe they get some series as they go and hope to share time with guys that have been in the program for a year and been in collegiate weight rooms for a year, like Xavier Truss and Mcclendon.
One of the things that I have, talked about a lot is that even if a guy like, say, Tate Ratledge, or add Broderick Jones to the discussion too, even if they don't win that competition, even if they don't emerge as the starters, the presence of that kind of elite talent pushing other guys to be better, that who does emerge as the starter will eventually be an even better player because of who it was they had to beat out to sort of get in that role. That's been kind of my theory when it comes to stuff like that. How true is that in your mind?
I think it's very true. I think it was a discussion point for us during the season when the offense wasn't performing very well, and Jake Fromm's numbers weren't exactly the same of what we'd grown accustomed to. And, one of the questions is the competition in the quarterback room to keep him as sharp as he possibly could be. I'm a big believer in competition, having benefited from it throughout my career and witnessed others who did the same. You can't rest on your laurels. I think Coach Smart has made that a point of emphasis since the first day he got there. I mean, Kirby comes in is like, you are each week competing for your spot to play, and I think that makes you sharp. I think he also has followed through on some of those things. Throughout the season, you see guys, I think of linebackers and defensive ends who earn more playing time based on what they did Monday through Friday so that they get that opportunity on Saturday. So it very much, the more competition that you have in the practice scenarios, the better you're going to perform when the game comes around.
Sir Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily here today. And by the way, speaking of competition and taking it to the quarterback spot where you were just on a moment ago, we also talked about this before you joined us a little bit today, that there's a math guy named Bill Conley, and one of the things he does every year is kind of puts out his returning production for the upcoming season, percentage of yards, and on defense, obviously the stats that kind of contribute to winning there, and who's kind of bringing back the most. For Georgia on offense, according to his weighted formula, Georgia's right at about 50%. That number where you could see a little regression just because you're not bringing back enough of what you did a year ago. By the way, in Georgia's case, that's a little bit more alarming just given the fact that the Georgia offense wasn't exactly stellar this past season. And I kind of use all of that, John. I'm not very smart. I'm not great at math, but I kind of use all of that as an argument to say that makes Jamie Newman even more important in my mind for Georgia this upcoming season, because he does have some experience gained somewhere else besides UGA, but there's a reason why I think that Newman is going to be treated a little bit differently than the sort of the typical quarterback might be at Georgia, because just given the fact that you're not loaded with experience at a lot of the other spots. You lost DeAndre Swift, you've lost Lawrence Cager. Having a guy who's played the quarterback position for Georgia, I think is going to be really important this year. He did it in the ACC, not the SEC. But experience, I think, does matter, and I think that Georgia's going to need to lean on that from Jamie Newman this season. What are your thoughts more on him as he gets ready to begin his first spring practice?
Well, let me first start with statistics, and I think you can always find a stat that you either love or you hate that paints a picture for whatever argument you want to make. I know I was in some sort of discussion about an article maybe that was saying that the best indicator for a team's success is returns receiving yards. Yeah. So, you look at the wide receivers and the factor that that's going to make. And I would, I was listening to your show before we hopped on and reading some of the comments on the Facebook feed just to see where folks were at. And, I think Jamie Newman absolutely has the inside track because he's played at a high level and has faced collegiate competition and excelled at it. Yes, I recognize that you're making a transition from the ACC to the SEC, and the competition that he'll see across from him is most likely increased, but he'll also have a talent base that should be superior to what he had at Wake Forest. So, yes, I think he gets the inside track there. But the competition is good. Same thing we were talking about with the offensive line. It's good that you've got in-house guys, Stetson Bennett, DeJuan, and then some new faces and Carson that come in, and they're all hungry. Everybody wants to be that guy because there's that open space. Same thing we were talking about tackle applies to this quarterback spot, that young, old doesn't really matter. It's who performs the best, and right now, everything is in pencil. There's literally nothing written in stone across the board. So I like Jamie Newman. I've actually been able to see some of his games now since he first was added. I was pretty clueless. And, he creates a lot of plays. He's got good vision, and in my mind, there was a lot that he was put on his shoulders to create when there wasn't a lot there, and he was able to lift the guys around him probably better than what they were. So I think he's good, man. I'm glad he's going to be wearing red and black come the fall.
No doubt about that. It's John Stinchcomb here as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. By the way, getting ready for Valentine's Day. Always a great chance to get over and enjoy some chef-inspired food, craft cocktails with our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. They take great care in everything they put right in front of you, whether you're sitting down for a beverage or enjoying a meal. It's true for a business lunch, a date night, whatever else. It's just a really, really fun time to get out and enjoy some good food, some good drinks, and some unbelievable world-class service. They really roll out the red carpet for you. We're big fans. We think you will be as well. So check out the Marlowe's Tavern near you. My guess is there's probably one in your neighborhood. So stop by and enjoy some great company and some great food and terrific beverages. Marlowe's Tavern. Of course, John Stinchcomb is part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. John, we got a bunch of UGA guys getting ready to go to the NFL Scouting Combine. I'm always fascinated by this because the process of being a football player is your entire life you're essentially patted on the back and told how special you are and how great you are through high school, and goodness knows we do that with a lot of recruits. Still mostly at the college level, there's a lot of love doled out to you. And yet when you get ready to make that transition to the NFL, at least in my eyes, my experience is it seems like that kind of stuff changes pretty fast. You get to this combine, there's a lot of poking and prodding, and all of a sudden the conversation's way more about what you don't do, more so than what you do. And I'm guessing for a lot of football players, maybe even for you, that was kind of a jarring experience. What is the combine really like for these guys who are about to go through that? And I guess how does the pressure of a moment like this, working for dollars, compared to the pressure of trying to compete to win on a college field?
Well, it's pretty funny. You never felt more like a piece of cattle paraded in front of folks like you have when you go to the combine. I mean, you're in these tiny shorts or compression pants with your shirt off and a bunch of people taking notes on your body type.
I don't want anyone taking notes on my body type, John. I'm afraid I'm afraid the only note would be just a frowning face if they were taking notes on my body type.
Watson, unless you're Ben Watson or Elijah Holyfield, some of these guys that I don't know if I would even own shirts if I was chiseled as they are.
Yeah.
They had no problem with it, but for 300 plus pounders, you get in there and you're you're saying, what's my best angle?
No, listen,
but
I understand
it's
that.
important. You're right. I think for the first time, it's such a critical eye that's being placed, and the expectations are high. You're playing for real money now, and sadly, a couple little mistakes here or there on a 3-day junket to Indianapolis can make a big difference in hundreds of thousands of dollars in compensation spread out over the next 3-4 years for you. So it's important, and guys start to feel that pressure, and you just want for them to be able to go up there and put their best foot forward.
Yeah, we talked to some guys last year, and over the years, a lot of these guys are training for that 40-yard dash, and I think the mental anguish they kind of go through. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, it's a dream come true to get a chance to play at the NFL level, but I know for, like, Elijah Holyfield in particular, he did so much work trying to get his 40-yard dash time down. That was something that, he knew he was going to have to work on. He believed that he had shown himself to be a good football player on the field, and I think for a lot of these guys, it ended up being kind of frustrating that what they've done on the field doesn't speak more to what they are as football players, that something they would do in kind of a glorified, almost like Olympic-style event would somehow weigh in the minds of NFL general managers more than, entire seasons worth of work on the field with film. I think for a lot of players, that ends up being pretty frustrating.
No, without a doubt. And some guys are looking forward to the opportunity because maybe they haven't been able to show their wares on the field. I mean, you see both sides of the coin. I mean,
that's a good point.
Mecole Hardman runs a 4.0. Yeah, he was smoking it down. What exactly do you run? Like a 4.2 something?
Yeah, he's fast, super fast.
I mean, the guy can roll, right? So, despite the fact that his production wasn't, surprisingly impressive at Georgia, it's hard to coach 4.3 speed. And obviously you saw what he was able to do for the Chiefs. So that's one side of the coin is, there are some freak athletes out there that will make all coaches look better just because of their natural ability, and you want to be able to identify that. The other side is guys that are just ball players that, they may not be statistically most impressive. I played next to Jari Evans, and let me tell you, you watch him in the weight room, and he's not going to impress you with his bench of 225, but you put him on a football field, and he's going to move some folks that look like immovable objects.
Sure.
And, that's always the debate. Always going to be the debate is, how much weight does non-football related analysis, not really related, but directly non-football, between the sidelines, I just don't get it. There comes a point where you have to say, can this guy play or not? And whether or not he can run 40 yards in shorts, I'm sure can help some guys make that analysis, but at the end of the day, it's about playing ball.
John, it is always great to have you on the program. You certainly do a good job of talking ball with us here on the program each and every week. Thanks for your time. We will look forward to getting a chance to catch up with you soon here as well.
Always a pleasure. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
You always get the Go Dogs there at the end from John there as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. That is always some fun stuff. And I am really fascinated by this. As someone who is not that kind of elite athlete, the way in which you have to get your mind right to go and compete in a situation like this. And, 10 Georgia guys get a chance to do that. I know a couple of UGA guys not invited to the Combine that still have NFL dreams. It's a pressure-packed season in their life as they're getting ready for this. And, the work even beyond draft day of trying to make teams as undrafted free agents, things like that. We all always wish all these guys really well, but it is a fascinating process to watch how you kind of evolve from being, Georgia football players get so much love from UGA fans, so much media attention, and you kind of feel like you're the king of the football world when you're playing in a program like this. But then you go to this NFL draft situation. One of the things I dislike with the NFL draft is how negative the conversation is. We don't talk about what guys do well. We talk about what they don't do well more often than not, and I'm imagining that's a pretty jarring experience for those who kind of go through that. It's time to go cruising around the SEC right now, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. Of course, always really fun stuff going on at Royal Caribbean. And one of the things that really sets out a Royal Caribbean vacation from anything else is a chance to spend some time. Perfect Day Coco Cay. This is the private island right there in the Caribbean. This is only available through Royal Caribbean Cruises. This is a unique experience, and it's really unlike anything else you're going to find anywhere. The island itself is kind of divided into two parts. You got the thrill side, the chill side. The thrill side's got like water park type stuff, helium balloon, amazing, just awesome experience, like the largest pool in the Caribbean, essentially. But you got the chill side on the other part of the island, which is like the cabanas and kind of a chance to relax, right there in the water. It's just an amazing experience. There's 16 different Royal Caribbean cruise ships that go to Perfect Day Coco Cay, so you've got a lot of choices to get to in terms of how you can experience this. This is the kind of thing that you're not going to forget when you're a part of that. So you need a vacation. Our friends at Royal Caribbean have a bold vacation choice for you, which includes Perfect Day Coco Cay. So contact your travel advisor or reach out to our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. You can call them at 800-326-4971. That's 800-326-4971. Tell them you heard about them with us right here on DawgNation Daily. All right, this may be more interesting to me than it is to everybody else, but I have a feeling if I'm South Carolina coach Will Muschamp, I'm not super happy about this. So Frank Martin, the South Carolina basketball coach, a guy that has a bit of a pedigree, he's taken the Gamecocks to a Final Four before, but he was asked about Jordan Burch, about the idea that Burch could play basketball. Now, I had never really heard anything about this, but apparently this is a little bit of a thing there in Columbia. And the quote, I'm going to read, this is from the State. The State is like the big news entity there in Columbia. Frank Martin asked about this on Saturday. Here's what he says. Will recruited him, meaning Jordan Burch, not me. But I've spent a lot of time watching him play basketball over the last 4 years. He's a really good player. That option to play basketball, which was part of the recruitment, is on the table for him. That's Frank Martin talking about Jordan Burch. Can you imagine for a second? Now, no disrespect to any basketball coach anywhere, Tom Crean included. But can you imagine 5-star recruit at Georgia and the basketball coach is talking about him during a press conference saying, yeah, this guy can come play basketball here if he wants to. If another football coach said that about a football player, that'd be tampering. Is Frank Martin not tampering with his own football signee right here? I'm not telling you what I know. I'm just telling you what I know. I bet Will Muschamp behind the scenes is seething about this. I'm not saying that Jordan Burt's not a good basketball player, but to give voice in a press conference, there's a way to kind of like ramp this down and say, oh, I know that he's going to be a great football player. I'm the biggest fan of the football team on this campus. There's a way to say things, and I'm not quite so sure that Frank Martin says it that way, and I love basketball. I love the idea of 2 sports stars. Fred Gibson, Larry Brown, Georgia's had some really fun 2 sports stars, over the years here. But there's no way that Will Muschamp is not furious with this. By the way, speaking of Muschamp in South Carolina, there are a bunch of coaches on the move with the Gamecocks, and now some coaches kind of coming in too. So the reports out there that Brian Mcclendon's on his way for an NFL job. Thomas Brown, Bruce Feldman says he's about to take an NFL job as well, so they're gone. Recruiting director about to go take a job at Ole Miss. Get the defensive line coach leaving to go take a job at Penn State. I guess now the moving pieces here continue. The Athletic is reporting that Tracy Rocker, most recently at Tennessee, also a former Georgia assistant, is on his way to South Carolina. So you got South Carolina and Tennessee, these 2 programs that seemingly have a quota of like either former Georgia players or former Georgia assistants they must have on staff at all times. And South Carolina losing a couple, about to maybe add another, not former Georgia player, but former Georgia assistant in this case, in Tracy Rocker. So it's the time of year where you're about to see a bunch of coaches on the move, and South Carolina is a really good example of that. Let me do a couple other quick stories here, and I know our music has ended, so I'll try to make this fast. I think this is really interesting. So there's a story, and I don't know who reports this first. I don't guess it really matters, but I'm going to read this from one of the news sites. Here we go on Twitter. You can see this. This is Auburn Football on Twitter saying, we are appreciative of the Board of Trustees' approval to recognize and honor the greatness of, boy, that is a word used loosely here, honor the greatness of Cliff Hare, Shug Jordan, and Pat Dye. So Hare, Jordan, and Dye, 3 former coaches in the Auburn program. Of course, Jordan and Hare, the 2 names that are adorned on the stadium. All 3 of these coaches are going to get statues at Auburn. Now, listen, I'm a big believer that programs can decide for themselves who is statue-worthy. It is fair to point out, Pat Dye didn't win a national championship at Auburn. I think Shug Jordan might have, but I think there was some NCAA. This is true. This is not even funny. Some NCAA stuff involved with that 57 team, who I think Jordan was the coach for. But nonetheless, Hare, who no one could pick out of a lineup, Jordan and Pat Dye about to get statues outside of Jordan Hare Stadium, which I'm kind of all for. If that's your greatness, those are the coaches that you want to honor. You give them a statue. At a certain point, though, why you're not giving one to Terry Bowden? He even had an undefeated season. But the point is, or maybe Gene Chiswick's going to get his statue with that big thick knot on his tie and everything else like he wears in the SEC network. The point, though, is that these guys are getting statues at Auburn. At a certain point, if you're giving Cliff Hare a statue at Auburn, Pat Dye, who didn't win a national championship, if you're giving these guys statues, the fact that Georgia doesn't have statues for Herschel Walker, or if you even want to say, Frank Sinkwich, who also won a Heisman Trophy, but Walker's the one that's the real egregious here because he's, I think the greatest player in college football history. The fact that you don't have a Walker statue when Auburn's essentially building a statue for every Letterman it's ever had, at a certain point that gets a little bit weird, doesn't it? And the fact that the Vince Dooley statue's like in Watkinsville compared to right next to the stadium, I feel like we're getting to a point where Georgia is maybe keeping up with the facilities race, but it's not doing a very good job of keeping up with the statues race. I don't know that it matters, but I feel like Georgia needs a few more statues if Auburn's going to build one for like just 3 coaches in the drop of a hat. I think it's kind of interesting there. By the way, Florida has added a home-and-home series with Cal, so pretty soon the Gators will be going to Berkeley. So Florida stepping up its scheduling a little bit, but maybe not a ton. Nonetheless, we'll make that cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, I want to get back to Kirby Smart here for a moment. And I want to play you a clip of Smart talking about defensive backs and the success that Georgia had in recruiting these guys for this upcoming cycle. And in discussing this, Smart mentioned something that he views as really important, And given kind of the theme of today's show, some sort of statistical evidence for what Georgia may be this upcoming season, this ends up feeling even more important based on, I think, some pretty key numbers. Let me let you hear Smart here for a moment. And in discussing this, Smart talked about one of the things that makes his substitution patterns at Georgia maybe a little different than some of the other programs on college football. Here is Kirby Smart on that.
I feel like we got a very complete defensive back class. I'll always reiterate, I think you have to sign 4 to 5 defensive backs a year in order to stay where you need to stay from a depth standpoint. We were very unique last year. We were one of the only teams in the country to play over 37 players, 100 snaps or more on the defensive side of the ball. So a lot of players are playing. We need a lot of depth on that side of the ball.
So I think it's really interesting. Smart says we're playing a lot of defensive backs. We're playing more than others. That's one of the reasons why we're always going to recruit a bunch of defensive backs each and every year. So that kind of brings us back to that Bill Conley piece from ESPN.com. And once again, I don't want to beat you over the head with numbers, but I do think that's kind of interesting that we talked before off the top of the program that receiver production, quarterback production, things like that, very predictive in terms of how successful you're going to be the following year. Well, Conley says the defensive version of that is productivity from the secondary, in particular passes broken up. And this is an area because Georgia plays so many different defensive backs that Georgia actually sets up really well for the upcoming season. You know already that Georgia brings back a lot defensively, but it's what it brings back in its secondary that might be the most important here. According to CFBstats.com, Georgia was 5th last year in passes broken up nationally. They had 62. And really the only big contributor from that that's not coming back from this past season is J.R. Reed. He had 7. But when healthy, Tyson Campbell had 4. I want to say Eric Stokes had like 9. Lewis Seen had a couple. He's going to be in a bigger role this year. Richard LeCount had 3. A lot of those guys who were producing those passes broken up a year ago are coming back for Georgia. And a smart math guy, way smarter than I'll ever be, Bill Conley, says that's really important for a defense this upcoming year. So that hype that's kind of building around the Georgia defense, at least in this one instance, maybe it might be warranted. Georgia experienced and deep in an area the math guys will tell you is really, really important. All right, we'll finish up with this here today before we do our Gator Hater Updater. So the referee from the national championship game back in 2017 is retiring. And I guess the Chicago Tribune caught up with him in an interview. It's kind of a wide-ranging interview. He talks about a bunch of stuff, dishes on a bunch of coaches. But in the interview also admits that Tyler Simmons really was on sides back in that national championship game of 2017. And he also kind of points out that maybe it should have been a false start on Alabama to begin with, which would have negated the entire play. But you've heard the phrase, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you. For a lot of Georgia fans who've been screaming this to the highest heavens for such a long time that Tyler Simmons really was on sides, now you get the referee retiring on his way out the door saying, yeah, I guess that was true. So I'm not really quite sure what you do with that, but nonetheless, that is the case. Here's something a little easier to process. Gator Hater Updater, 1,199 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That's good news. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, where I want to take a lot of your comments. You can kind of weigh in on some of the stuff from today's show, or really anything else you want to talk about from the weekend. I didn't mention the basketball team during the show, but obviously another loss for them on Saturday. Disappointing there. But I will remind you that this was one of those weekends with the snow coming down and everything else. I'm sure your heating system, your furnace was working overtime. That's one of the reasons why you can trust our friends at R.S. Andrews. They will get your system and make sure that it's good enough to make it the way through the rest of the winter, and it's safe for you and your family. Peace of mind. You can't put a price tag on that. But at R.S. Andrews, it costs just $99 for that $99 mega furnace safety check. So check them out online at rsandrews.com. You can find out a whole lot more from them. So I've got like 87 browsers open on my computer. However, none of those are the comment sections. Let me pull up Facebook here first. We'll kind of get rocking and rolling on there, and then I'll do some YouTube after that. We'll have about 10 minutes or so. We can kind of bang through as many comments as possible, and we'll give you a chance to have your say on today's show, and certainly hope that all of you are doing really well here today. All right, on video on Facebook, Ace Calloway says, was I a fan of Kobe Bryant? Yeah, Kobe was always kind of my, like in Kobe versus LeBron stuff, I always rooted for Kobe. Now, in the sort of Jordan versus anybody debate, I'm always going to take Jordan that because, you know, that's my era. or I should say era. Some of you may say it is an error, but the Jordan is my era, so I'm always going to side with Jordan over anything. But yeah, in the Kobe versus LeBron stuff, I was a Kobe guy. In the Kobe versus Shaq feud, I was a Kobe guy. So he was definitely my guy compared to some of his contemporaries for sure. By the way, Sandy Price says happy birthday to Kendall Milton. No doubt about that. Happy birthday for sure. And what a exciting career that Kendall's about to embark on at UGA. Already on campus and seemingly having a good time. What else is going on? I think this is a good comment. Let me read this. Chris Branham says, I don't like blaming refs, but Georgia got jobbed. Missed face mask, false start on Bama's fourth down, game-tying play. So the one thing I am sort of proud of is, and no one else cares about this but me probably, but I am sort of proud of this. I'm pretty sure that if you go back and listen to a lot of those shows, rewatch a lot of those videos from that era. That's the second time I've done that. Era, post 2017 national championship game. One of the things I think you're going to see is that we did not go crazy on this is a travesty. Tyler Simmons was onside. He was onside. It was a bad call, and obviously, if it's called that way, ignoring whatever Alabama may have done pre-snap, allowing the play to happen, and Tyler Simmons gets the block kick, obviously the tone of the game has changed. For the most part, though, winners aren't whiners, and we have never done a whole bunch of whining about officiating. We just never really have, because ultimately my belief is that nobody really cares. Now, we have some fun from time to time with the Tyler Simmons stuff, and obviously that's that kind of sort of meme type thing that's going to live forever. But for the most part, we have never really, sort of banged the Tyler Simmons was onside's drum, even though he obviously was. It's just never really been our thing. We don't do a lot of complaining about the officiating because really, for the most part, no one cares. That's my feeling on that anyway. So I'm actually kind of thankful for our record when it comes to that. Chris Slim White says, how do you think that James Cook can be used in the new offense? I'm very curious to see. My concern with Cook has always been, is he going to find a true position to call his own? Is he going to find a position to kind of call his home? He's a running back that almost could be a receiver. He could be a receiver that's like a running back. Sometimes, though, it's hard for a guy like that to truly find a spot. That is admittedly my concern, but it's one of the reasons why I'm glad that I think that Georgia has more competent offensive coaching for this upcoming season. Because a guy like James Cook is probably maybe the most likely to benefit from something like that. So hopefully Todd Monken's offense is going to find a way to get him involved in a way that previous offenses were just not going to be able to. But there is something to be said for a lot of smart people are kind of tinkering around to figure out what's the best way to use a guy like Cook. And as of yet, they haven't necessarily found that. Spencer Edwards says, I don't get all the James Cook hype. I don't know if there's a lot of James Cook hype, but ultimately, this isn't all that hard to figure out. In addition to being an elite recruit for the class of 2018, he's also got a famous brother. This was a pretty contested recruitment. So, Cook's kind of always going to have that kind of going for him. He was a pretty famous recruit, and so there's always going to be curiosity about how a guy like that gets used. Devin Glenn says, Cook can ball. Y'all obviously don't know much about football. Well, if that be the case, then I guess we'll see him do that this upcoming season. Green Soldier says that Todd Monken's about to shut up a lot of people. Yeah, I think that Monken is certainly a good hope for a lot of these guys that maybe have been underutilized. I would put Demetrius Roberts in that category. Now, Georgia, second half of the season, certainly, final quarter of the season, probably even more so, seemed to really be trying to get Demetrius Roberts involved, and it just wasn't really working. But D-Rob and Cook and Kearis Jackson, a lot of these guys, they may find themselves more at home in a Todd Monken offense than they would have been in previous offenses. That's certainly what you hope to be the case. I mean, I do think, I won't even sugarcoat this, I think that Todd Monken is far superior as a play caller to James Coley. Coley's got value. I'm not going to trash Coley, but there's a reason Coley's not here anymore, and there's a reason a guy like Todd Monken is. And, if he's given the freedom to do what he wants to do, then we should see, certain guys flourish. We should see that. John Beecham says, on Andrew Thomas. You must remember that he's extremely intelligent. Was coached in high school, Pace Academy in Atlanta, by former NFL lineman who taught him about weightlifting and footwork. Yeah, John, I think you're absolutely right about that. I mean, as I said before, it's great research by Connor for his piece, and I would argue that like 5 guys out of 48 is about the distribution you would expect. You've heard of like Pareto's law, the 80-20% principle, that 20% of all results, or I should say 20% of all category will sort of produce 80% of the results. Like if your sales organization, your top 20% of your sales force is going to get like 80% of your sales. It's just kind of how life goes. So about 10% of this category having the most success is about how life works out. And as John points out, there's probably a reason why certain guys are in that category. In Andrew's case, not an early enrollee, but he was a part of an elite program, had really, really strong, I mean, by elite, I mean not greatest program in the country, but like really, really quality coaching. A lot of these private schools just have very expensive coaching staffs. Pace Academy, among the more expensive private schools in Atlanta, there's no telling what they spend on coaches for their football team. So he had really good coaching. He had a really modern weight program, probably. I would also say, though, that Trayvon Walker, now, a little different in the fact that he was a part of a rotation, but Trayvon's a little different in that, he's at a public school, and defensive line's not necessarily offensive line, but, he kind of came in at Georgia as a summer enrollee as well, and he was kind of ready to go. And we talked to Trayvon back during January, and it was pretty clear that he just had a mindset of making sure that he was. He was studying up, he was working out, he was doing those kinds of things. So Andrew may have had some built-in advantages because he was at Pace Academy, but there are some ways in which you can make yourself a little bit more like Andrew if you are a summer arrival. I think Trayvon Walker did that as a defensive lineman. I think a guy like Broderick Jones could do that as a summer arriving offensive tackle. I think the numbers speak for themselves that it is a challenge to be as good of a freshman as Andrew Thomas is. But the fact that Thomas isn't the only one to have done that certainly suggests it is a possibility. And if it could be true that Xavier Truss emerges, that Warren Mcclendon emerges, at that point in time, that might actually even be better news that, hey, some of this depth that Georgia has recruited for really is kind of working out the way that it's supposed to. I think that's a really good comment, though, John. Very good comment. CB, I think, talking about Aaron Murray in the XFL yesterday. Yeah, I think that apparently didn't go so well for him. I didn't get to see the game, but apparently they didn't go so well. Buddy Lee Z says, how about top 2 sophomores that could have a great breakout year? So one of those that I'll mention is Tyreke Stevenson, because I talked before about, experience on defensive secondary. Stevenson was a guy who athletically got his hand on some footballs, was good at doing that for Georgia a year ago. And I think that in an expanded role this year, kind of getting comfortable now at Georgia after maybe being a little frustrated early in his career about not playing more in the early stages of the season, maybe kind of settling in there a little bit. I think Stevenson may be one of those guys. And I guess it'd be easy to stay in the secondary and also mention Lewis Seen as well. So I'll do that at least for now. Rob D says over under 3,500 total yards for Jamie Newman. That's a really good question. I'm sometimes not great at the over under stuff, so give me a chance to do some work on that. Alan Verbanchik loves the idea of Stevens. He says dominating. It'd be great to see. James Crump also bringing a good point, and I said this during the regular show, that you look at the offensive linemen who've played as true freshmen. You have the guys who are like maybe truly elite talents in the programs, in some cases who were desperate. Maybe Georgia in 2017 was kind of in that more desperate category. There's a chance that's true. Kyle Norton also mentions Nakobe Dean as one of those breakout sophomores. Good name to think about. Amos Williams said Stevenson also had a couple of sacks. Yeah, that was one of the ways in which they got Tyreke really involved late in the season was, and Georgia tries to find a role for everybody. And that kind of blindside cornerback blitz thing became something that Stevenson became very good at during the year. Ross Durham says, do you think Nolan Smith will take the next step? Just given the way that he competes, I think that's a fairly safe bet. I do. Sebastian Anderson says that Georgia is going to be It's 60 to 70% chance of winning the 2020 national championship. Only team, he says, that competitive at this point is Ohio State, Clemson, LSU also all took a hit, losing starters. Look at us at UGA. We lost Jake, Hot Rod, and Swift. Offense will be different. End of traditional UGA offense. Yeah, listen, I think seeing how the transition to a new offense kind of negates some of what Georgia lost, that's a big part of the offseason conversation. Sandy Price says rotating those running backs is going to be important. I believe that's probably true as well. Matt Rukavina, Nate McBride for Senate. We haven't heard as much Nate McBride stuff in the comment section lately. I kind of missed that. Hugh Nash, also Tommy Bush is another one of those guys. You got Tommy Bush, Nate McBride, James Cook. That's sort of your like comment section all-stars. I have a feeling Ladd McConkey may end up in that group before it's all said and done. But yeah, that's kind of your comment section all-stars. Shelton Tucker says he thinks that Hersch Walker could still dress out. Yeah, I think he could too. By the way, all those Auburn statues, doesn't it make you seem like Georgia should get some more statues? Am I wrong about that? Hugh Nash says, what's the word on Clay Webb? I think that Webb, is just having to kind of wait his turn. A guy like Warren Erickson had been in the program a little longer and kind of, ready to go. Obviously, I think Georgia feels good about its current starter at center what is wrong with me? It must have been a long weekend because Trey Hill. What is wrong with me? I was blanking on Trey's name. So you feel good about Trey, and you got Warren Erickson's kind of moving around a little bit. I know that Clay Webb's interesting and also moving around a little bit too. But sorry about that, Ross. I don't know what was wrong with me there. But nonetheless, I think that Webb's just in a situation right now where he's kind of having to wait his turn. I think that's kind of the thing. Christopher Rule says he just thinks Auburn has too many statues. Maybe the case. SEC Dog asking about Cade Mays. He's still waiting on his eligibility ruling. Still waiting on that. All right, we're going to have to get ready to go here in a second. Anything else going on? Always good stuff in the YouTube comment section. Travis Nunley says the loser between Bama and UGA probably sneaks into the playoffs by not playing the SEC championship game. I wonder. We've seen Alabama get that benefit of the doubt before. I wonder if Georgia could earn that same benefit of the doubt. I wonder if Chris Branham says I just short-circuited. Listen, one of the things that I'm always like potentially at risk of is just like completely like blanking on a name. I was also trying to read some comments, dude. Try to make sure that I see what people are talking about. I try to get people as involved in the show as I possibly can. But for now, we are going to have to go. We appreciate all of you being with us here today. By the way, Steve Bond mentions Natori Johnson. I'm interested in watching Natori this year too. It looks like at least by the end of the season, Natori was kind of back on that offensive line again. Does he stay there? Notori's one of those guys I still feel like is going to be heard from. I really do. That's another kind of comment section all-star type guy. But, I think it takes a lot of guts to go from offensive line, try to play defensive line, really work to get your body in shape there. And I think that he really got himself into some pretty good shape last year. And then because of some depth issues on the offensive line, kind of come back to the other side of the ball again before the end of the year. I think that speaks well of Natori. Something tells me we're going to hear from him before it's all said and done. Aaron Brown said, is Ben Cleveland eligible? Yeah, that's been the expectation that he will be eligible and playing. No one seems to be too concerned about that. All right, we're going to go for now. Thank you all for being here. By the way, make sure you check out the AJC, Atlanta News Now. Obviously, the Atlanta Falcons getting ready for the NFL Draft. There's a lot on that. As we said during the regular portion of the show, the Braves getting ready to start spring training. You can find out a lot more about that. Just a lot of stuff kind of going on. Plus, if you're still thinking about what you're going to do for Valentine's Day for that special someone, the AJC always does a good job of kind of chronicling all the things happening around the city of Atlanta, so you can check that out as well. And really check in throughout the day to stay up to date. Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. So check that out. By the way, huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They take care of all those things for us. You can trust them for any of those things for yourself there as well. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. They can deliver a smile for you as well. Check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right, y'all have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another edition of DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Look forward to talking to you then, everybody.